Apostolic exhortation of Pope Francis on St Therese, c'est la confiance following. The little way of trust and love. One of the most important insights of Therese for the benefit of the entire people of God is her little way, the path of trust and love, also known as the way of spiritual childhood. Everyone can follow this way, whatever their age or state in life. It is the way that the Heavenly Father reveals to the little ones. Matthew chapter 11, verse 25. In the story of a soul, Therese tells how she discovered the little way. I can then, in spite of my littleness, aspire to holiness. It is impossible for me to grow up, and so I must bear with myself such as I am, with all my imperfections. But I want to seek out a means of going to heaven by a little way, a way that is very straight, very short, and totally new. To describe that way, she uses the image of an elevator. The elevator which must raise me to heaven is your arms, O Jesus. And for this I had no need to grow up, but rather I had to remain little and become this more and more. Little, incapable of being confident in herself, and yet firmly secure in the loving power of the Lord's arms. This is the sweet way of love, that Jesus sets before the little and the poor, before everyone. It is the way of true happiness. In place of a Pelagian notion of holiness, individualistic and elitist, more ascetic than mystical, that primarily emphasizes human effort, Therese always stresses the primacy of God's work, his gift of grace. As a result, she could say, I always feel, however, the same bold confidence of becoming a great saint, because I don't count on my own merits, since I have known. But I trust in him who is virtue and holiness. God alone, content with my weak efforts, will raise me to himself and make me a saint, clothing me in his infinite merits. Apart from all merit. This way of speaking is in no way opposed to the traditional Catholic teaching on the increase of grace, namely, that once gratuitously justified by sanctifying grace, we are changed and enabled to cooperate by our good works in a process of growth and in holiness. Through this elevation, we can possess real merits by virtue of the development of the grace received. Therese, for her part, wished to highlight the primacy of God's action. She encourages us to have complete confidence as we contemplate the love of Christ poured out to the end. At the heart of her teaching is the realization that, since we are incapable of being certain about ourselves, we can't be sure of our merits. Hence, it is not possible to trust in our own efforts or achievements. The Catechism chose to quote the words that St Therese addressed to the Lord, I will appear before you with empty hands, in order to express that the saints have always had a lively awareness that their merits were pure grace. This conviction gives rise to a joyful and tender gratitude. It is most fitting that we should place heartfelt trust not in ourselves, but in the infinite mercy of a God who loves us unconditionally and has already given us everything in the cross of Jesus Christ. For this reason, Therese never uses the expression, common enough in her day, "I will become a saint." Even so, her boundless confidence encourages all who feel frail, limited and sinful to let themselves be elevated and transformed in order to reach greater heights. If all weak and imperfect souls felt what the least of souls feels, that is, the love of your little Therese, not one would despair of reaching the summit of the Mount of Love. Jesus does not demand great actions from us, but simply surrender and gratitude. This insistence of Therese on God's initiative leads her, when speaking of the Eucharist, to put first not her desire to receive Jesus in Holy Communion, but rather the desire of Jesus to unite himself to us and to dwell in our hearts. In her act of oblation to merciful love, saddened by her inability to receive communion each day, she tells Jesus, "Remain in me as in a tabernacle." Her gaze remained fixed not on herself and her own needs, but on Christ, who loves, seeks, desires, and dwells within.